Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Chase Glenn, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Full Acceptance, AFFA, one of South Carolina's leading LGBTQ plus advocacy organizations. At AFFA, we envision a South Carolina where the LGBTQ community can not just survive, but thrive. And part of being able to make that a reality here in South Carolina starts at the ballot box and electing candidates who understand the issues impacting LGBTQ plus people and are willing to stand up for our rights without fear. That's why we are taking the opportunity to introduce our followers to the out LGBTQ plus candidates who are running for office this election cycle. Identifying as LGBTQ plus doesn't necessarily guarantee that we'll see eye to eye on all of the issues, but representation is important, so we want you to meet those who are running. We've already highlighted these candidates on AFFA's website. Invite you to go to affa-sc.org/vote for more information on each of these candidates and their websites. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Francie Kleckley, who is running for South Carolina Senate District 10. Francie is one of 4 openly LGBTQ plus candidates seeking to represent us in the state legislature, and we're thrilled to learn more about her campaign, her vision, and the issues she's passionate about. So, without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Francie and hear directly from her about her journey and the change she aims to bring to South Carolina. So, Francie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you, Chase.
Of course. Well, let's start with your background and maybe share what inspired you to run for South Carolina Senate District 10.
So I'll tell you, I was born and raised in Bennettsville, South Carolina, lifelong South Carolinian, lived my entire adult life in Lexington. But I spent my career working for the Internal Revenue Service. I retired as your executive over Privacy for the Nation for IRS, but prior to that, I worked as the taxpayer advocate for South Carolina, and then I went on to work nationwide where I pitched legislation to Congress around protecting taxpayer rights and reducing undue taxpayer burden. I also served as the executive co-lead around tax-related identity theft. And I tell you all of this to say that I had a wonderful 36-and-a-half-year career in the government, and not that I've ever left South Carolina, but I have certainly spent a lot of time traveling the state, and when I came home, instead of watching national politics that I had been accustomed to, I started watching our local politics, and I was horrified at the focus on the wrong things that harm people in our state. And so I waved my placard, I made my phone calls, I gathered people, I wrote my congressman, but the needle never moved in the right direction. And so because I was a federal executive, I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this work and to do it well and to do it in a way that represents all of South Carolina. And so I had to come out of retirement to see if I can get elected to the Senate and make a difference for South Carolina.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for throwing in the hat and putting yourself out there and running for office, coming out of retirement. We all appreciate that for sure. So let's just get into it. I mean, what do you feel like are the key issues you plan to address if elected to represent District 10?
So my general observation about where our state legislature is going, and I will say that my opponent, Billy Garrett, is one of the most extreme members in the Senate. Some say he's further right than the Freedom Caucus in the House. And so my observation is that our government wants a place in our doctor's offices, in our bedrooms, and in our classrooms, and that is not a place where our politicians should be. That infringes on our personal freedoms. So it really started kind of as the catalyst is when Roe was overturned, and then I watched our General Assembly pass almost a complete abortion ban. And I will tell you that my opponent voted to remove rape and incest from the existing abortion ban. Unimaginable to me. And so I am running to protect our freedoms. The second thing is that then they came and banned, gender affirming care. I believe that everyone has the right to make those personal decisions for themselves without government interference. And then I move on to public safety, where my opponent was one of the staunchest backers around permitless carry that only makes law enforcement's job harder and citizens less safe in the communities, the schools, and the churches. My third, not that I don't have a long list, but at the top of that list is also Medicaid expansion. I think most folks don't realize that we've already paid taxes on that money. And because my opponent, who sat on the Senate Medical Affairs Committee, didn't lift a finger to expand Medicaid in Senate District 10. So it leaves 345,000 South Carolinians, 82,000 of which who are children without affordable health care. Now those folks still have health care needs, and that cost is just going to be passed on through increased copays, higher out-of-pocket costs, increased insurance premiums, and so every citizen in South Carolina deserves quality health care.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's a wonderful platform, and you're right. I'm sure you have a lot of other sort of priorities
The
and
closer I look, the longer the list gets.
yeah, absolutely. But all of those you mentioned are so important. I think really speak to the heart of what a lot of just regular South Carolinians are dealing with and thinking about on an everyday basis. So really just appreciate you sharing all of those
I was going to
points.
say, it of all the problems we have in South Carolina, whether it's quality public school, quality health care, all of that, they choose to spend their time focusing on taking away rights and freedoms and interfering in book banning and classroom curriculum. And so we've got to shift that paradigm if we're going to make any progress in this state.
Absolutely. Well, you've already touched on, even just what you just said there about book banning and curriculum, and previously mentioned the trans healthcare access for youth, and we know here in some adults have been impacted by the law that was passed just this year. So, but kind of along those same lines, given this sort of political climate that we're in, which let's just all acknowledge is pretty contentious, and if we're going to talk about groups that are targeted in this state, the LGBTQ plus community is absolutely on that list of groups that are being targeted just because of who they are, how they identify, who they love.
Right.
And I guess so just kind of digging into that a bit more, are there other specific legislative changes that you hope to champion to support and protect the LGBTQ plus community in South Carolina?
So certainly gender affirming care, certainly women's reproductive rights. And then at the top of the list, and again, my opponent has been a staunch backer, are hate crime bills. We're one of two states in the nation that doesn't have a hate crime bill. I think they should be ashamed for not having a hate crime bill.
Yeah,
Where we can
absolutely.
punish those locally who commit these crimes. We could, between the hate crimes bill and sensible gun laws, we can keep criminals off of the street and we can keep perpetrators of domestic violence at bay.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know that they've had multiple opportunities. This legislature has to pass a hate crime bill. This year, most recently in this past session, it got hung up in the Senate. Right? It was the
Right.
senators who couldn't get it done, and your opponent would be one of those who absolutely was
Doesn't want it
opposed to
to happen.
passing it.
Right, right. And I think the other thing, and this does have an impact on the LGBTQ community, is the venue crisis, where because of the laws that have been created around liquor liability insurance, so many of our small businesses are having to close their doors or move to another state. And they had several bills at the State House towards the end of the session that could have helped that. And so that is impacting, not just the tavern owner, but the dishwasher, to the performers in these, and to the musicians, the bartenders, and the wait staff. And certainly now those folks will be on the unemployment rolls. And I believe that small business is the lifeblood of any community, and South Carolina is 99% of our income comes from tourism. So we really can't afford to close the mom and pop bars and restaurants because our legislature hasn't bothered to define liability or lack of liability or to alter any kind of our laws.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't hear a lot of candidates talking about that issue, and it's something that impacts so many people outside of the LGBTQ plus community, but also within the community who, really that's part of their livelihood is
I was going to
being
say,
able to
when I
be.
started this process, I heard very little about it, and now I cannot go anywhere without someone saying, "What are you going to do?" They're closing right and left. So
Yeah.
I think it is a big impact on all of South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Just as one of only, we already said, the four openly LGBTQ plus candidates running for the state legislature in our state, are there any sort of unique, I guess, challenges or even opportunities that you see that you sort of kind of been opened up to during this campaign? And I guess it could be related to your identity, but not necessarily. I guess any sort of challenges or opportunities that have come up for you?
So I think the first challenge, and I certainly experienced that in the federal government, is the fact that I'm a woman. And then, I'm sure my opponent will drop flyers any day now talking about the fact that I am openly gay, that I am in a relationship with a woman. And, some people will think that that somehow disqualifies me to act on their behalf, when actually I am using my government experience, my government savvy to try to protect the things that the majority of South Carolinians hold near and dear to their heart. And so I think it'll just be one more reason that folks decide, oh, well, But again, that is about the hateful rhetoric and the divisiveness that we see at play both at the state and national level.
Yeah, right, exactly. And, at the end of the day, I would hope this race is about the issues
Right?
and about the things that really, the South Carolinian, the population actually cares about, right? The
Right,
things that
but I
impact
think,
them.
yeah, we see, coming particularly from the far right, the extremists, that anyone that doesn't look and think like them is somehow marginalized and is somehow a second-class citizen. And, another catalyst for running was looking at what Project 2025 is proposed, and I think that that is going to take the progress that we have made on human rights, particularly LGBTQ rights, and turn the clock backwards. And so we cannot let that happen. We fought too hard to get where we are today with marriage equality to have that taken away in one election cycle.
Yeah. So, what message would you like to convey to LGBTQ plus community members and allies in South Carolina who may be looking to you for some inspiration and leadership? Do you have any sort of message for those folks who are listening to this video today?
As you started at the top of this, I think we have to stay optimistic and hopeful because, again, we have worked too hard to make sure that human rights are protected to have that go away. And so instead of thinking about what we can lose, I think we have to think about what we can gain and how much progress we can make for those folks. Obviously, I am not a young person, but what we can do to leave a better South Carolina for the young people where it's okay to be who you are and feel supported by the folks in your state.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that message. And as we're closing up here, how can supporters get more involved in your campaign, help amplify your messages, and ensure a successful election outcome for you?
So visit my website, franciekleckley.com, Feel free to sign up to volunteer. Volunteer, we have calls every Thursday night. You can make phone calls, knock doors, write postcards, put together signs, all the things that it takes a gazillion pair of hands to make a campaign successful. You can also donate. That's always helpful. You know, for every few dollars, we can buy another yard sign to get the message out to the voters. But I think the big thing here in 2024 is social media. And certainly, if you will friend me on Facebook, if you will like my my campaign page on all the social media outlets, you can find all the handles on my website, but certainly spreading the message to those who are voters in Senate District 10. Would you like for me to talk a minute about where that actually is?
Sure, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. So because of the redistricting, I live here in Lexington County. Lexington County, after this election cycle, will be represented by 4 different senators. You know, that's an opportunity for inconsistent or lack of representation. But it's a swath of Lexington County, and it's the upper third of Saluda County and all of Greenwood County. And so I'm pretty sure all of your listeners have friends or family who are located in Senate District 10. So I would certainly appreciate sharing my platform with those folks that you might know in Senate District 10.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today and sharing a bit more about yourself, about your campaign, and the issues that are so important to you and I know important to so many of us. Just want to thank everyone else for joining us today, checking out this video. Want to encourage you again to go to affa-sc/vote for more information about the upcoming election and the other candidates who are running for office. Thank you again, Francie, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Take care.